Everybody has bad days. Don't worry. It's not the end of the world. There's always tomorrow. You can do it. I'm ready to support your next effort. I'm always here for you. Everybody has bad days. Don't worry. It's not the end of the world. There's always tomorrow. You can do it. I'm ready to support your next effort. I'm always here for you. Everybody has bad days. Don't worry. It's not the end of the world. There's always tomorrow. You can do it. I'm ready to support your next effort. I'm always here for you. Everybody has bad days. Don't worry. It's not the end.
Underscore's real name, April Harper Grey, is probably my favorite artist of all time, with their two albums Wallsocket and Fishmonger meaning so much to me. Along with these two albums, I adore her EP Boneyard, aka Fearmonger. I think what makes Underscore such an interesting musician to me is her background in electronic music, as she made a radical shift into more guitar-centered sounds like pop, punk, and sometimes country, while still maintaining some aspects of our electronic roots. A great example of this is the song Lone Sharks, which while having a math rock-esque complex riff, the track also implements classic Skrillex-like dubstep growls, creating such a unique and invigorating sound that you will not find anywhere else. So in this video, I'm going to be covering every song from April's projects Fishmonger, Boneyard aka Fearmonger, and Wallsocket, talking about her interesting production choices, alongside an analysis of her amazing writing. Also, I'm very aware she has many EPs pre-Fishmonger that I think are really solid, but they're just like not content heavy enough to make whole sections about, so I'm just going to leave them out of the video. This video will be split into two parts. Part 1, which covers Underscore's Fishmonger era, which contains her debut album Fishmonger, along with a follow-up EP, Boneyard aka Fearmonger. Then Part 2, which covers Underscore's Wallsocket era, which contains her sophomore album, Wallsocket. Fishmonger is my most played album of all time, with over 1,000 plays in the last 2 years or so. Like most, Fishmonger was my introduction to Underscores, with my online friend putting me on her randomly one day, and this album just blew my mind at the time. April's vocal stylings especially had me in a chokehold, as before this I'd never really heard vocal layers been used to create such a dynamic listening experience. Something else I adored about this album from the start is the cohesiveness of it all. As though it doesn't necessarily follow any narrative, it definitely still brings you into the world of Fishmonger. This is done through all the little details throughout the album. The bubble sounds on 70%, the countless fish and water references in lyrics, and of course the repeated tags throughout the album that are just so iconic. Anyways, in this section I will be individually dissecting each track on Fishmonger, really trying to comprehensively explain the respective themes of each track, and possibly how those themes connect to other tracks on the album. 70% is the opening track to Fishmonger, and in my opinion is severely underrated. After a cool little drum roll, the track bursts into the most loud and abrasive Underscores track to date, having energetic distorted drums paired with guitar that sort of reminds me of Splatoon, all tied together by extremely passionately distressed vocals from April. 70% uses an apocalyptic metaphor to explain the mental health crisis, thematically matching the intensity of the instrumental and vocal delivery. The track introduces this apocalyptic theme in the very first line of the track. From here, April introduces two people referred to throughout the track, using the he and she pronoun to differentiate them. First introducing the he, saying he's a decent guy but has an edgy sense of humor. Then introducing the she, saying that she's been struggling and the people around her have only been making it worse. The second line continues to talk about the girl while reinforcing this apocalyptic theme, comparing this girl's distress to the world being on fire. Following the first verse, there's the repetitive chorus with the repetition of the line, which, while further painting the apocalyptic picture, also explains the title of the song, as the body is made up of 70% water. So by saying the water is dried up, it could not only refer to the metaphor of the apocalypse, but also of the life drying up in these people, dissipating, due to the issues they're having. This then brings us to the second verse, which continues to talk about the girl, saying how she was sent to an asylum by her parents due to presumably her substance abuse, as it's mentioned on the following line. Then there's a personal excerpt from April, which is saying that despite all the social consequences of the internet, there's still some really great aspects that you could consider vital to some people's lives. Specifically, it creates a space where queer people can feel accepted and be themselves, despite whatever their local community thinks of gay and trans people. After this brief personal excerpt, we are brought back to our boy character, where in contrast to his lighthearted introduction, these lines talk about his poor mental health and emotional suppression. The final thing I want to mention about this track is highlighting the importance of using the he and she pronoun. The use of different pronouns in the lyrics help convey the difference of issues between boys and girls in high school. On 70%, the boy gets a lighthearted, surface-level introduction, but is broken down crying by the second verse. whereas the girl is portrayed in a more emotionally vulnerable state right off the bat. This is meant to make the break where the boy cries on the second verse a representation of the suppression of emotions that a lot of men commit to most of their lives, and the consequences of that. The second track on Fishmonger, Secondhand Embarrassment, takes quite the sonic shift. That while having the grimy guitars of 70%, it also has really punchy drums and a catchy chorus, being a combination of sorts between rock and hyperpop. Lyrically, this track talks about a person in April's life that has poor communication skills, which leads to a toxic relationship of sorts between them and April.
Don't talk if you're not gonna say much. You could have something you don't like the taste of.
Following the introduction of the track's theme through the chorus, the track goes into the first verse. In this verse, April continues to complain about this person, saying that despite how bad this person feels after April has cut them off, April doesn't want them back in her life. This theme of April completely pushing this person out with no empathy is then furthered with April saying how this person can't be with himself since April left them, depending on the company of others to function. A bridge then closes off the track explaining how toxic the relationship was.
Don't talk, and if you don't say something, I'm just gonna dig myself deeper. I wish it could have gone a little cleaner.
These lines explain the poor communication skills that this person had, where they wouldn't tell April anything, consequently putting April in a worse place mentally. Bozo 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 was the first underscore song I'd ever heard. When about 2 years ago in a Discord call, someone played it for me. I was completely blown away by the first half of this track as someone who wasn't really into any hyperpop at the time besides glaive. Bozo 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 opens with this earworm of a guitar riff, paired with super dynamic vocals that have so many different pitches, glitches, and effects. But what really captivated me is when the track dropped into a trap-like drum pattern. That combination of genres was so unique to me, and since then I've been completely obsessed with April's work, and specifically her extremely unique production style. Similar to the track before, Bozo 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 also talks about communication. This time about April being emotionally vulnerable, leading to people taking advantage of her. A lot of this track is written as if April's talking down to herself. This theme and style of writing are both introduced in the first verse of the track.
Bozo, 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 you're an idiot. Always talk too much, let's not get into it. Why you so sad? Where'd that pretty face go? Ask me how I'm doing and I'll spit it out like cinnamon.
The chorus then speaks more about April's regrets of opening up, saying how April has overshared so much it makes her uncomfortable to talk about the things she's told people, and she'll do whatever she can to avoid the topic. Using the metaphor of dancing until her legs hurt is especially important, as it represents that though April can try her hardest to avoid the topic, she won't be able to forever. She'll eventually get tired, her legs will eventually hurt. This brings us to the second verse on Bozo Bozo Bozo, which further builds on April being too vulnerable, specifically talking about how she overshares to her online friends, which can connect back to the opening track 70% and the lines. From these lines, you can piece together that the internet being a key aspect of April's life is to an extent the reason she has issues with oversharing in real life now. As when she would overshare on the internet, there was no real consequences as these people were disconnected from April's real life, giving her a lack of understanding for the consequences of oversharing in real life. After this, April talks about how regretful she is for being so reckless and careless when it comes to telling people about her issues. Bozo 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 is closed by a third verse that begins by talking about how people will take advantage of April due to this power they have over her, saying that she will be intimate without a second thought when she is in such an emotional state.
Bozo, 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 you're an idiot. Snap your fingers, flick your wrist, and I'll get intimate.
The track closes with April saying she now tries to completely block out these emotions, but still regrets the time she was too vulnerable around the wrong people. Kinko's Field Trip 2006 is the first of the softer tracks on the album, that despite having a section that uses grimy guitars similar to 70%, it is generally a soft acoustic track. The theme of Kinko's Field Trip 2006 is April's insecurity in her own character, specifically how she doubts the existence of her own issues, trying to invalidate her own feelings by telling herself that she's just doing it for attention. The track opens talking about her depression.
Never have I ever, no I haven't, and I bet I probably won't. Don't ask me how I'm doing, how I do it. Chances are I probably don't.
Confessing her lack of motivation and overall lack of feeling due to her depression. After this, April talks about how she tries to be exactly like her friends as to cope with her lack of identity. Following this line, April says,
And if only I knew who it is they think that I am.
Which is April explaining that she doesn't understand how her friends can like her as she sees herself as such a shell of a person, wondering how they can perceive an idea of her when she can't even perceive an idea of herself. There is then a repetitive chorus that cements this theme.
I think I'm falling. I must be falling.
From here, there's the second and final verse of the track, opening with the iconic lines, I just love this line as it can be interpreted into a million different meanings, making it extremely captivating to me. But what this line means in the context of the track is April's trying to hide this deep insecurity she has, specifically trying to never talk about this depression she's feeling. You can connect this idea to the track before, Bozo Bozo Bozo, where April talks about how she gets too vulnerable with too many people, inevitably hating herself for it afterwards. This connection is then strengthened by the lines that follow in the verse.
How did you get everyone to think that you were impressed? Tell me if it's not on purpose, why'd you do it again? Just admit it, you don't have a world that you're up against
Anymore?
Where Did You Fall is sonically a super interesting track to me, with this super clicky percussion that creates such an energetic yet slick and calm beat. Like it feels like it has so much energy without even trying because of how smooth it is. Where Did You Fall talks about April accidentally hurting someone, thinking she was doing what's best. This theme is introduced in the lines,
And it hurts cause I haven't done you this bad since I broke your heart.
From here, the track further establishes April's misunderstanding of what was best for this person, saying it's what she thought they needed. It's then explained how this person expected April to be there for them when they were in a shitty place. But she can't help them now as she's the person that's put them in that shitty place. In this final verse, April continues to talk about her immense regret for whatever she did, with her comparing this heartache to the physical pain of heartburn. The verse is closed by saying,
I get sent to slaughter, I need a couple seconds. That's somebody's daughter. That's somebody's daughter, that's somebody's best friend.
Which I interpret as April saying that the emotional wreck this person is in has put them in a place where they're on the verge of suicide, being sent to slaughter.
Am I extreme?
Following the sonically and lyrically dark Where Did You Fall, there's a Brit pop-punk song, Spoiled Little Brat, full of super fun guitar, little cute synth melodies, and like every track on this album, really cool vocal stylings. Matching its colorful instrumental, lyrically this is the most lighthearted and fun track on the album. This track talks about the life of a pop star, talking about April does pretty much whatever she wants because she's a rich and famous spoiled brat. Also, if it wasn't obvious, April's playing a character on this track, as I'm pretty sure she's not extremely rich and she's not very famous at all. I think this is something worth mentioning, as on her following album Wallsocket, she plays a lot of characters. The first verse on Spoiled Little Brat begins talking about how April lives an ignorant life, completely disregarding others due to her immense fame, being friends with other people only to climb to the top of the social ladder. This theme is further established in the chorus with her repeating of the lines, Well, the first verse talked about the toxic popularity contest between peers in the industry. The second verse talks about the power dynamic between people in the industry and people struggling to make it, i.e. record label CEOs versus artists, opening with the lines,
It's been really nice to know you. Stick around and I'ma do my worst. What the hell did you expect? I'm a pop star, baby. Pop star, baby.
talking about how people go into the industry with the expectation that signing to a label will help them as an artist. Well, often it can be the exact opposite, with these labels exploiting these young people who don't know any better, just wanting the glamorized lifestyle portrayed to them in the media. This idea of this verse being about labels is then pretty much confirmed in the following line.
I'm the one you sold your soul to.
As the action of signing a controlling record deal is commonly referred to as selling your soul, as you lose your creative control of what you can put out as an artist. Spoiled Little Brat is one of my favorite underscores tracks, not only for the super fun energy the track has, but also its capability to balance having fun lyrics while still saying something. On top of this, I love the idea of getting your message across by writing from the perspective of a character, something we'll see a lot of on Wallsocket.
And I've been eating toothpaste, cause you give me toothache.
Your Favorite Sidekick contains the first of 3 features on Fishmonger. This first feature being from artist 8485. 80 is an artist that I'm a pretty huge fan of myself, with 115 being my favorite song of all time, along with her EP Plague Town being amazing, along with various other things she's done that I think are really cool. But even putting all that aside, I believe she has a truly amazing performance on this track, just having amazing chemistry with April. It's unbelievable how smooth the two of them work together. Your Favorite Sidekick has an extremely similar sound to a track earlier on the album, that track being Secondhand Embarrassment with very fun and playful hyperpop production. On the lyrical end of things, this is probably my favorite track off the entire record. And what this track is about from my interpretation is codependent relationships. April sets up the theme immediately in the chorus, describing first how she's struggling, then framing this person, who is portrayed by 80 in the song, as a solution to all her problems. The first verse of this track, delivered by 80, continues to push this theme of we're both depressed, might as well be depressed together. This is most vividly shown in the opening lines of the verse.
All dressed up, nowhere to be ever. I could rot, let's do it together.
I really love 80's verse, as though it does continue the depressive narrative of the track, it's also just so much fun, having fun lines like, Black Dogs, White Socks, 2014 cliche, I'm bored, Oxcord, let me be the DJ, which is just a line like I kind of have to say to myself sometimes a lot, like it just gets really stuck in my head, like a lot. It's just, the way she delivers that line is just so like catchy and charismatic, I just can't like not think about it always. Following this verse, there's a bridge from 80 that starts to show the negative sides of this relationship, but not without still having her fun lyricism. The rest of this bridge talks about how 80 could see this relationship falling apart, and how she is losing sleep over this person. Alternatively, this could be 80 explaining that her problems have gotten worse due to the relationship. The final verse is then delivered by both April and 80, that besides being simply a musical choice, could also represent the mutual feeling of what's being said in those lyrics. The lines continue to talk about the suffering of these two people and how they try their best to find comfort in each other. The track then ends on a reiteration of the chorus over a super nice ambient guitar piece, calmly closing out a super energetic track. Dryland 2001 is the longest song on Fishmonger, clocking in at a little over 7 minutes due to its 4-minute ambient outro. This outro has such a beautiful calming atmosphere, layering bitcush bird chirping, guitar that surrounds you beautifully, soothing scents, and the sounds of water tying back to the aquatic theme / atmosphere of Fishmonger. This track also has a feature from Gabby Start, formerly known as Knapsack, who does great on this track, and also has great solo stuff you should check out. On a literal level, Dryland 2001 talks about the 2007 Ellie tornado in Manitoba, Canada, but this tornado is obviously being used to represent something personal to April, that being a past relationship she had. Like many tracks on this album, Dryland 2001 begins with April talking about how bad this past relationship is making her feel. A few lines later, the track introduces the metaphor of this tornado.
Stay alive, 2007 F5, Highway 59, I don't know how to drive.
With 2007 F5 representing the Ellie tornado as it occurred in 2007 and was an F5 on the Fujita scale. The significance of Highway 59 is that it's a highway in Manitoba, the province that the tornado occurred. But this theme of the tornado isn't just randomly brought up, as the lines preceding the first mention set up the connection between the tornado and this relationship.
Someone's gonna call you when it's early in the morning. I didn't really want to, but I'm starting to think that my mind's not the only thing spinning around and around.
These lines firstly introduce the relationship, talking about this reluctant calling, representing a greater reluctance to try in this relationship. This lack of care shown to April could be what she's thinking back about, wondering if she was the problem. This event then perfectly connects to the tornado metaphor in the next line, saying how though she is having issues personally, she's starting to think there may be other factors besides herself. That factor being the relationship, therefore explaining that the tornado is used to represent the relationship. The verse is then closed off with the lines,
I remember I was falling, all I had to do was open my eyes.
which by using the metaphor of being caught up in a tornado, being caught up in this perpetual state of falling, describes the distressing / destructive nature of this now ended relationship. The second line, all I had to do is open my eyes, then explains how April doesn't have to endure this relationship any longer, and she can simply open her eyes and leave the inside of her own head to escape the relationship, as it only exists in her mind now. From here, there's a chorus that continues to use the metaphor of the tornado, saying how this person used April, chewing her up and spitting her out, similar to how a tornado does with objects in its path. On top of April talking about how the shitty relationship happened, she is also trying to figure out why, trying to understand what she had done to receive this poor treatment from this person. Following this chorus is Gabby's verse, that though not being as heavily linked to the core theme of the track as April's lyrics, the track still does somewhat connect to the theme, specifically the line,
I never guessed a day would have gone by like this, but now the day goes by without me thinking of you.
These lines are saying that no matter how crazy of a day April is having, assuming that Gabby is writing from the same perspective as April on the track, her mind always brings her back to this person and this relationship, with it feeling virtually impossible to move past this person. The track is then closed off by a reiteration of the chorus twice, then the aforementioned 4-minute ambient outro that I feel could possibly represent April coming to peace with this past relationship, but that's quite a stretch. Anyways, this peaceful instrumental perfectly transitions the listener into the following track. Backed by the soothing instrumental of soft guitar and synths, the Fish song is lyrically amazing, telling a cohesive and captivating story in just a little under 3 minutes. This track tells the true story of a golden bangus spawning in a pond of exclusively silver bangus. The track begins by describing the discovery and appearance of the fish from the perspective of the fisherman who found it, talking about how unique it was with its eerie blacked out irises and beautiful gold color. From here, April talks about how the bangus was kept by the fisherman due to his fascination with the rare fish, even keeping it after scientists had asked for the fish. There's then a haunting refrain with the lines,
I know you are on a something.
that though not vividly telling the story like the two verses, it still does add to the somber feeling of the track. There's then the second and final verse that continues to tell the story of the golden bangus, talking about how the fisherman had given the bangus to the city so it could have better care and could be a mascot, as he saw the fish as a unique good luck charm. But while in the care of the city, the bangus had been found dead due to stress and low oxygen, spoiling the lucky charm. I really adore the writing on this track as it nearly exactly follows this article, but tells the story in a much more graceful and emotional way, making me cry to a song about a fish that died 10 years ago due to how beautifully April wrote this. Also, a really interesting fact about this song is that it had been the idea that led to the creation of Fishmonger, with the entire album being more or less based around this fish. Del Mar County Fair 2008 is a closing track to Fishmonger, and begins with a similar sound to the track before, having soft guitar and soothing synths, but eventually builds into a more grand electronic pop instrumental. This track has the third and obviously final feature of Fishmonger, that being from Maxwell Young, who is someone I'm not familiar with at all, but his feature on this is pretty great. Del Mar County Fair 2008 talks about April being too hard on herself for something she did to someone. This track also has a setting, that being a county fair in Del Mar, San Diego. I really love the idea of this track taking place at a fair, as to me the entirety of Fishmonger has a similar atmosphere to a fair in my opinion. Like one time I was at a fair in Florida and I listened to Fishmonger and it just fit the atmosphere perfectly. Now to get into the track's lyrics. This track opens setting the scene for the story, vividly painting the picture of being a kid/teenager and going to the county fair in early fall. The second half of this verse then sets up the narrative, talking about how April selfishly ran away from someone after they tried to open up to her. From here, there's a pre-chorus that further establishes how much this guilt is weighing down on her.
It's my bad, it's my bad, it's my bad. Don't lie, pay it back, pay it back, pay it back sometime. Don't be mad, don't be mad, don't be mad when I apologize for the very next time.
I especially love the line, "Don't be mad when I apologize for the very next time," as it explains this dynamic of April constantly apologizing for this thing she did, to the point where this person tells her to stop, as it didn't even affect them as much as this guilt did April. Alternatively, this person is getting mad at April for constantly apologizing, as an apology doesn't change anything and just reminds them of what happened. The chorus then has the haunting repetition of the line, which is probably one of my favorite lines on all of Fishmonger, as when paired with this perfect delivery, it really adds beautifully to this theme with guilt feeling like a darkness swallowing April. Maxwell Young's verse continues the narrative, talking more about what happened. These lines reveal a lot more important context to what specifically happened, as the last line, "I shouldn't freeze again," opens a possibility that this person had confessed their romantic feelings to April, but April didn't know how to react, so she froze up and ran away, as said earlier in the track. April then returns to the track for a bridge, which is her giving her reasoning for running away from this person. The track, and with that the album, are beautifully closed by Maxwell, further speaking of the guilt of leaving this person in the dust. Fishmonger is a piece of art that means so much to me, helping me through countless different situations through the 2 or 3 years that I've been listening to it. Besides my personal connection, this is a landmark album in the hyperpop scene, and I'd say it kind of defined the sound for the following years of the genre. Following Fishmonger, April didn't make music for 5 months due to a feeling of existential dread, until coming up with the opening track of Boneyard aka Fearmonger, Everybody's Dead. This existential dread definitely bleeds into the music on this project, with the themes of many songs and even simply the titles allude to this existential, apocalyptic theme. Despite being a continuation of the Fishmonger era, Fearmonger is very different sonically. This is most likely due to April's alternate approach to this project, where for the first time she forced herself to write something on guitar before adding any of her signature electronic elements. This led to a much more rock-oriented project, having many indie rock tracks like Dunk, along with some emo rock tracks like Everybody's Dead. Though this project does sound very different from her work before, it still feels like an undiscussed project. As well, her electronic elements are a lot less prominent on Fearmonger, they still shine through along with her charming sound effects and captivating vocal layering. One last thing I want to mention about this project's sound is how dubstep influenced it, with these Skrillex-esque dubstep growls scattered throughout the record, most prominently shown on Lone Sharks, which not only implements dubstep, but has a full-on dubstep segment as the outro. But this implementation of dubstep should come as no surprise, as April had started out as a dubstep artist, taking huge influence from artists like Skrillex.
Let me try one more time.
Everybody's Dead is the opening track to Boneyard aka Fearmonger. That following a snippet of Skrillex talking drops into a grand wall of sound that instantly transitions into a quiet little indie rock track, being a sonic whiplash of sorts, throwing you in 3 different directions in the first 7 seconds of the track. From here, the track progresses into an emo pop track that is just so much fun. On the lyrical end of things, this track is talking about a guy who is using April, only showing interest in her when he's drunk. The track opens displaying the lack of care this guy has for April.
You don't have the guts anymore. Hit me like a truck and I fell to the floor. You don't give a fuck anymore.
Showing that these mixed signals are really taking a toll on April, which leads to her developing a hatred towards this guy. The next verse continues to talk about how shitty this guy is, starting by saying he doesn't have the guts to commit to anything, and he's such a dick that it doesn't feel like he's had a bad side, and it's just simply he's always the worst person he can be. April then asks if she can have anyone else, as she desperately wants to escape this toxic relationship. But she can't because this guy's holding secrets over her head. There's then some fun wordplay.
80% your function. So can we skip the introductions?
Using the analogy of video game speedrunning to explain how anytime this guy talks to April, she just wants to get out as quickly as possible. The narrative of this track then ends, explaining the nature of this relationship most vividly.
The only time that I'm the girl of your dreams is when you shit face. Another white boy with a concussion. I compromise for second place. Don't bother asking why it took so long to show my face. Why do you?
Girls and Boys is a super energetic track with a hook that I get stuck in my head all the time, but this track does not sacrifice lyrical value at all for how catchy it is, being one of my favorite tracks off the record lyrically. Continuing the theme of the last track, Girls and Boys also talks about a shitty dude, possibly the same shitty dude from the last track, opening with the lines,
My doctor asked me if you were to die for, but you're not even someone I would lie for. Of course not, get off your fucking high horse, we just fucked.
This is talking about how this guy's gotten a huge ego boost from getting with April, as he usually isn't able to get girls. This is contextualized by a line in the intro where April recalls the interaction.
I think he said, like, don't take this the wrong way, but, like, I can't get girls.
The line in the intro could also be alluding to the fact that April is trans, and that this guy doesn't consider her a real girl, only sleeping with her due to how desperate he is, not actually having any respect for her. Pre-chorus then continues to talk about how April settled for a guy much below her standards, then talking about how she doesn't even want to be affiliated with this guy. The chorus then reveals a contradiction of emotions from April, where despite her not really liking this guy, she still does like the attention and feeling of someone wanting her. This leads to the repetition of the line, representing her confusion and resentment towards herself for realizing she misses the guy she thought she didn't actually like. The chorus is followed by another verse, which further reveals the toxic nature of this relationship, saying how April has a bad habit of getting with people who treat her poorly / don't care about her, like the guy on this track, and the guy from the track before. Then in the pre-chorus, April talks about how she knows that this guy still constantly thinks about her. Alternatively, this is April trying to convince herself that this guy still thinks about her. As she'd explained in the chorus, she misses the attention he gave her. The narrative of Boys and Girls is closed off by her bridge, where April reinforces the idea that this guy only got with her because he was desperate, seeing April as lesser than other girls due to being trans. This idea is specifically shown in the line,
Everybody's me except mine.
I ought to swallow my pride. In moments like this when I try my luck and I don't know why.
The third track on Boneyard is Heck. Heck is an indie rock track with classic punchy underscores drums. Lyrically, this track very much focuses on death, with it using the metaphor of being in a relationship with the Grim Reaper. More specifically, the track talks about April having this obsession with death, being in love with the idea of death. This theme of death is immediately put right in front of you with the line,
I ought to swallow my pride. In moments like this when I try my luck and I don't know why, I flew a little too high. I saw the Reaper and I didn't even try this time.
These lines are April talking about having issues with substance abuse, where she's constantly putting her own life at risk due to her irresponsibility, to the point where she isn't even aware that she's taking too much until she's facing death, facing the Grim Reaper. The verse then further describes this imminent feeling of death, mentioning various pains she has. Then by using the metaphor of a very fast highway, April explains how she cannot simply escape the pain. Once she takes the drugs, there's no escape, and she has to wait out the bad trip. There's then the line,
I'm seeing symbols that I've only seen when I'm about to die,
which reveals that the song is not so much about actually dying, but more so the feeling of near death / paranoia that death is imminent. April delivers the following lines as if she's talking to someone, saying this person is making April feel dreadful. This person being the Grim Reaper, with April feeling a constant looming darkness from the moment she wakes up every morning, further pushing this idea of April having severe paranoia about death. The verse then ends returning to April's substance abuse habits, once again using the metaphor of the Grim Reaper with the mention of crossbones, along with the line that follows saying the Grim Reaper has his foot on her neck. The track then talks about the Grim Reaper for a final time, with April saying she's a slut for the Reaper in that she will do anything that he asks, which obviously means she welcomes death to take her due to her dreadful obsession with the concept.
drown out drugs in the panko, that's just throwing up.
Like Heck, Gunk is also about death and is backed by an indie rock instrumental. But this track more so focuses on April's substance abuse rather than just the big idea of death. Gunk begins similarly to Heck, talking about taking way too many drugs then being stuck on a road. But instead this time April is in control and gets off the road. The next lines then explain an urgency April feels to take her own life.
And I don't wanna get sick, I've got a bullet to bite before I drive myself crazy.
Saying she's seeing all these problems in her life build up and she needs to take her own life before she's driven insane. The second verse somewhat mirrors the first, in not just delivery but also the nature of the lyrics, with April once again speaking about purposely drinking too much and doing nothing but that. In the final line, this habit is revealed to be a coping mechanism for her paranoia of imminent death mentioned on the track before. The bridge continues to establish April's looming fear of death.
Did I swallow my tongue? I puncture my lungs.
Following this, April recalls other people telling her that by living her life in fear, she is truly not living her life at all. April closes the track talking about her temptations towards suicide, seeing death as this release from this intense, deep-rooted fear she has of it. But at the end of the day, she won't do it, since she already has been through so much that this fear will not be the thing to break her.
Okay, alright, okay.
I'm all messed up. This is what I get for being lucky.
Lone Sharks is an extremely energizing track, with intense dubstep growls and plucky guitar riffs, co-produced by Breakins. This track also has a great Gabby start feature, and is said to be the sequel to Fishmonger's Spoiled Little Brat, at least according to the extended title of the track. Lone Sharks aka Spoiled Little Brat 2, dying in the Northern Hemisphere somewhere. On the lyrical end of things, Lone Sharks is about the broken capitalist system failing the youth, while it has been presented to them in an idealistic way their whole lives, with April calling it the Great American Nightmare. Lone Sharks opens with a chorus where April continuously mocks the idealistic attitude many middle-aged people have towards the system America works on. Beginning by talking about how the system has negatively impacted April due to its many problems that are ignored, as the average person is still better off in the States rather than a third world country, with people telling her to just be grateful for being in such a wealthy country. April then continues to dissect the issues with this idealized life, which is saying how the media romanticizes the idea of putting in as much effort as possible to attain immense wealth, fame, and power, making many kids believe they need to go out in the world with a greedy, self-serving mindset, only caring about how they're going to accumulate as much wealth as possible, rather than finding joy in passions and human relationships. The chorus is then closed off by the line,
are one and the same.
Which is April expressing how national of a problem this is, with the whole song not just being about her experience, but the experience of the American youth as a whole. April's verse then further delves into the ignorant and greedy mindset shoved down children's throat by bringing back the spoiled little brat character from Fishmonger. Whereas on Spoiled Little Brat, all April cared for was accumulating as much fame as possible, using people to climb the social ladder, now on Loan Sharks aka Spoiled Little Brat 2, April only cares about accumulating as much wealth as possible. This is expressed through this idea of April only spending money because she can, not because she wants to. The second half of this verse is April speaking from the perspective of this brat, saying that since it's not a third world country, since they're never at a point where they need to be begging on their knees for enough to live, it truly cannot be that hard at all, and no one has anything to worry about. From here, Gabby has a brief verse where he builds on the themes of this track. First talking about how recent generations have turned back to spirituality due to this existential lack of meaning they feel in a cold capitalist society. Secondly, he speaks on the mental health crisis young people in America are facing due to this aforementioned existential dread caused by this capitalist society, using his sister as an example.
What do you mean the American dream? My sister's 16 and she don't even wanna live anymore.
The final thing I want to touch on about this track is its title, Loan Sharks, as I think it's just perfect. As loan sharks are people who illegally lend money at high interest rates, then ruthlessly threaten the loanee, making them pay back money they don't actually have out of fear for their life. This just perfectly represents how unforgiving the capitalist system can be to a lot of people, perfectly encapsulating the theme of the track.
You used to wear your tongue to your cheek when you got mad.
Following Loan Sharks, co-produced by Breakins, this track also has co-production, this time from Travis Barker of Blink-182. And you can definitely hear Blink-182 stylings shine through in this track. Lyrically, this track is quite different from the last few, talking about idolization, specifically recalling moments from April's childhood. The track opens with April immediately expressing how much she idolized this person.
You used to wear your tongue to your cheek when you got mad. I don't know if you still do it, but I wanted to try it on.
Saying how April attempted to adapt this person's mannerisms as she looked up to this person so highly, but people noticed that it wasn't April being herself and these mannerisms came off as forced and awkward. The chorus then talks about this idea of individualism April had built up in her head all surrounding this person, with her analyzing every little detail of this person's life just to be like them, saying how insecure she'd be if others found out how she is such a shell of a person as her whole being is based in this person. The second verse then reveals this envy April had for this person, with her being jealous that they have such a well-rounded personality, having a part to play in playing it in their world. Well, she just felt out of place. She then talks about her envy for this person's social status of massive fame, as April was really lonely and the idea of having so many people know and care about you, even if it was parasocial, seemed very appealing to her. The track then ends with the repetition of the line, expressing this resentment that she has built through this envy, believing that she was supposed to lead the life this person did, and she failed by not doing so. Closing Boneyard aka Fearmonger is Salt Fields, There's Nothing We Can Do. This is a retrospective track of sorts, being a look back on all the themes talked about on the project, from April's lack of identity to her obsession with death. The track opens with the lines,
I said I was boring, I wasn't kidding. This shit is worse than I thought.
which calls back to Tongue-in-Cheek, where April talked about how she felt like such a shell of a person that she simply imitated someone else she idolized. There are then various other callbacks, such as how her obsession with death left her stuck, hesitant to live her life. Throughout these callbacks, there's the repetition of the line, "There's nothing we can do," which represents that though April has complete awareness of these problems, she's helpless in fixing them and continues to live on with all her problems. I love how this track closes the album on a hopeless yet conclusive note. Nothing has changed for April, yet there is no more story to tell. This is how things have been for her, and this is how they will be for her, indefinitely. Boneyard aka Fearmonger being released the same year as Fishmonger is just unbelievable to me. Not only due to the immense quality of both these records, but also the fact that there's such a sonic shift between the two, sounding almost nothing alike, at least in my opinion. I really appreciate how tight and cohesive this project is, not wasting a single moment, constantly hitting you with the most intriguing sounds and lyrical themes that create such an interesting listen of intertwining themes, genre blending, and that underscores charm in vocal delivery and production. One last thing I want to mention about Boneyard aka Fearmonger is how a lot of tracks on here foreshadow a lot of significant themes on her following album, Wallsocket, such as an obsession with death, being obsessive about a person, and toxic relationships. On her birthday, Underscores mysteriously announced her second album, Wallsocket, through a video teaser which asks 12 questions. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What do you have? Where does your money come from? What allows you to exist? Where did you grow up? Who are you forgetting? What are you obsessing over? What community do you belong to? Are you ashamed? What's your circumstance? Do you wrap back around? These 12 questions capture the main themes of the album and are answered throughout. A few minutes after April releases the video trailer, she puts out a message stating, "I got to take the past year off. I stayed in this town called Wallsocket for a while by myself. It's this super small town in Michigan, and the longer I stayed there, the more inspired I got. I started to write from the perspective of the people I saw there, trying to imagine what they were thinking and feeling, and the circumstances that allowed them to exist. Everyone is such a character. Welcome to Wallsocket." So, what is Wallsocket? Wallsocket is a fictional town created by April to tell the story of this album. According to the official Wallsocket website, Wallsocket found its beginnings as a horse town due to its suitable land for grazing and proximity to the large industrial cities of Michigan. But as the years went on, the demand for horses had declined due to the popularization of cars. This led Wallsocket to fall from its golden age, but despite this, it has never stopped being a horse town and never lost its small town charm. Now, in recent years, Wallsocket has seen a revival of sorts when the corporation's secretariat opens in Wallsocket, leading to a big population spike of new secretariat employees attracted to the short commute time and small town charm. The spike of new citizens was even further boosted by the pandemic, as it led many wealthy individuals to move to the city seeking more space than in lockdown cities. This led to a gentrification of the once middle-class, charming little horse town. The people of Wallsocket had an attitude that no crime had or would be committed in their town, due to its small, close-knit nature. That was until longtime resident of Wallsocket, Joshua Domingo, had been exposed for siphoning money out of people's bank accounts for over a decade. This event brings us to the first track of Wallsocket, Cops and Robbers. This crime had left the people of Wallsocket shocked that someone who they had lived among for so long had been stealing significant amounts of money from fellow citizens. This reaction had been captured by the @townofwallsocket TikTok account, where they had interviewed longtime Wallsocket resident Marcy Dillinger.
Have you heard the recent news of the embezzlement that's been going on for close to a decade in our town?
Yeah, things, you think things are, can't get any worse, but there they go, and all of a sudden we've got this thing too. And this is a guy, everybody knows this guy, right? Nobody had any idea. Like, all these people lost their money. People are already struggling. People can't afford this orange right here, So what are they going to do now?
Who do you think is to blame for the way our town is going downhill?
Well, I always look to the deep state.
After being exposed, Joshua Domingo fled the town, never to be seen again, abandoning his family. Though this leaves an impact on the town as a whole, the true victims of this robbery are the Domingo family, who have now been completely ostracized by the town due to the lack of trust, despite them having nothing to do with Joshua's crimes.
Baby, I'm delusional. Big practical expression. It's the talk of the town. It's the talk. Baby, I'm delusional. Big practical expression. It's the talk of the town. It's the talk of the town.
Wallsocket tells a story of 3 girls following the Joshua Domingo bank robbery. Those girls being Sunny Domingo, Mara Albright, and Old Money Bitch, whose real name is Sarah. And while she is rarely referred to by Sarah, I'm just gonna say that because Old Money Bitch is a mouthful. While the first track on Wallsocket, Cops and Robbers, establishes the world and events that led to the story taking place, the second track establishes the protagonists of this story. Locals, Girls Like Us opens with April saying seemingly random words.
Machinery, catharsis, technology, ragtag, transcendence, try-hard, high-strung, neurotic, blue cross, golden arches, pearly gates.
But in reality, these lines thematically establish the album, being a combination of words to do with mechanical/corporate things versus emotional/human things. Let's take the line Blue Cross, Golden Arches, Pearly Gates for example. The first 2 phrases are companies, Blue Cross for American healthcare insurance and Golden Arches for McDonald's. Then the third is Pearly Gates, which are the gates to heaven, creating this extreme contradiction between this cold mechanical world and this real human world. To me, this connects really strongly to the color theory of the album that was based off of the regular show, where there's Mordecai, who's blue, white, and black, representing clinical, unnatural, and electric. Then there's Rigby, who is black, brown, and gray, representing rugged, dirty, and acoustic. Then there's the park, which is various shades of green, representing natural, grounded, and communal. This reflects the contradictions shown in the intro, with Mordecai being the McDonald's and healthcare insurance, the park being the pearly gates, and then Rigby is a transitional stage of sorts, being the connection between the two worlds. April puts this idea into words wonderfully in a product information message sent to record stores. A lot of the themes of the project can be summed up by taking something natural and trying to sterilize it. One last thing I want to mention about this album is how it goes from random words to the consistent pattern of
arms, body, legs, flesh, skin, bone, sinew, good luck.
Which, like the other seemingly random words, also plays into a big theme of the album, that being the human body, which is heavily talked about throughout the album, whether it be about dysphoria or in a metaphorical sense, like on Uncanny Long Arms. The body is a prominent subject of the album. Anyways, now that I've talked about the intro much longer than I should have, I will get into the real meat of the track. Locals, Girls Like Us feels like a roll call of sorts for the three protagonists of the album, with each verse being from the perspective of one of the three girls. This roll call begins with Mara, where it introduces her obsessive tendencies. In this verse, Mara's obsession about Sunny is revealed by her talking about how she's done a questionnaire over and over again, trying to get the same results as Sunny, revealing this desire to not only know everything about Sunny, but to be Sunny. The second half of this verse then reveals the parasocial nature of this relationship.
We've been inseparable since 2009. She just doesn't know about it yet.
As though Sunny has consumed Mara's life completely, Sunny doesn't have any care for Mara. Delivered by Sunny, the second verse reveals that Sunny hasn't even done this questionnaire that Mara is so fixated on, introducing the idea that though Mara is so obsessed with Sunny, Mara truly doesn't know or understand Sunny beyond a surface level. From here, Sunny explains how she is aware of Mara's stalking, but makes sure to keep her distance.
But I've got a 10-foot pole. And if I could, I'd poke her with it right between the eyes.
If you don't know, 10-foot pole means to avoid associating with someone. The verse is closed off with the line, "May God rest her soul," introducing Sunny's religious background, which is a prominent topic in her story. There is then the third and final verse, which is my favorite part of the entire song, being a feature from none other than Gabby Start, written from the perspective of Sarah. Sarah is very much seen as an outsider by the town due to her immense wealth, hence everyone referring to her as Old Money Bitch rather than her real name. Due to this, her verse is written as if she's a spectator rather than just a regular person like everyone else. So due to this, the verse doesn't really reveal much about Sarah's character besides her elitism, specifically highlighted in the final line of the verse, showing that she finds it humorous how people lower than her act. Also, fun fact, Gabby wrote this entire song in the style of Pavement's song, Stereo, specifically with the line,
Man, he wiggles when he walks.
which takes from the line,
Pigs, they tend to wiggle when they walk.
Not only this, but just the whole delivery of the verse mimics the Pavement song. Now that I've gone through the three verses for the three protagonists, I'd like to talk about the overarching theme of this track. This theme is highlighted in the chorus.
Stop me if you heard this one before. Girls like us, all right to the core.
Explaining that all three of these girls are seen negatively by the town. Sarah for her wealthy family, Sunny for her criminal father, and Mara for her obsessive tendencies. The track is then closed by Gabby with him calling back to the robbery, saying how it's the talk of the town, reminding the listener that though the narrative of the album continues, the actions of Joshua Domingo still linger in the town, and specifically within the Domingo family.
Duh. Duh.
Now that the world of Wallsocket has been established, on the third track of the album, Duh, April really starts to delve into the story, beginning with Sunny. On this track, Sunny talks about a rare disease she's been diagnosed with, saying that the disease is benign, rare, and is easily recognizable, but not much is known about it. From these lines, and a few other lines scattered throughout the track, it becomes rather obvious that this illness is gender dysphoria, hence the word duh scattered throughout the track, showing that once Sunny came to the realization she's trans, it became rather obvious to her, as she'd felt like this for ages. A common experience for trans people. Following the verse, the track goes into a passionate chorus, whereas before Sunny had been talking about her illness in a relatively calm manner.
I can't believe it. Dear God, could you be more subtle next time? And I'll take the bait, 'cause for the very first time in my life, I'm fixing a bite.
In the chorus, she displays the emotions she feels about finally coming to this realization, saying how she's been denying these signs that God has been putting in front of her whole life, but now she stopped fighting this reality and has accepted it. This has led her to begging God to stop showing these signs, / stop the feelings that she has with her dysphoria, as she has finally come to terms with it. But like how it is for most trans people, simply accepting that she is trans wasn't enough to make her content. On the second verse, Sunny says,
"'Tis the name of my illness. It's just one letter short of my own."
which I find to be a really great line, as it references the asterisk in Sunny's name, which represents her transition from Sunny with an O, the masculine version of the name, to Sunny with a U, the feminine version of the name. Therefore, Sunny is saying that her illness is the masculine version of herself that she resents, only being one letter short of her real feminine name. The second half of this verse is spent questioning why this dreadful condition has been put upon her, believing she must have done something wrong to be put in this position by God.
I must have been greedy. Surely I engaged in some cardinal sin. My favorite animal is engraved on the sides of my ribs.
I would have never picked this up, but a comment on a Genius annotation of the track mentioned how the final line of the verse,
My favorite animal is engraved on the sides of my ribs.
may be a biblical reference to Eve's creation, as God created Eve from one of Adam's ribs, representing that Sunny came from a man's body, but is truly a woman. On paper, this interpretation may seem like a lot of a stretch, but there are many biblical references on Wallsocket, and Christianity is a huge part of specifically Sunny's character. The track narratively closes on a bridge, which further expresses the intertwining relationship between Sunny's gender identity and her Christian beliefs, talking about how she feels that God has put this burden on her, that God has complete control of her, with a sign on the back of the Jeep line referring to when people have their back of their cars plastered with Christian slogans and imagery. Sunny then concludes the track with a heart-wrenching delivery of the lines, saying how she is more scared of the life she has to live with gender dysphoria than she is of death. Alternatively, this line could be expressing her fear of God's judgment when she dies, as being transgender is seen as a sin by many Christians. After Duh establishes one of Sunny's many problems, the following track on the album, You Don't Even Know Who I Am, establishes Mara's obsession with these problems. Similar to the track before, You Don't Even Know Who I Am begins with the repetition of a line, that line being,
Everybody has bad days, don't worry. It's not the end of the world, there's always tomorrow. You can do it. I'm ready to support your next effort. I'm always here for you.
which represents this unhelpful attitude of constant positivity, not actually acknowledging the issue at hand, a common sentiment of small towns like Wallsocket. Alternatively, this opening line could refer back to the idea of sterilizing something natural, as this opening line has a very corporate attitude, which is trying to sterilize something raw and natural, like human emotions. On the chorus, Mara talks about how she knows every minuscule detail of Sunny's life, from who her friends are to where she lives. Despite this, Mara has no connection with Sunny, only knowing her in a parasocial sense. It is then revealed that this obsession Mara has is rooted in a deep envy she has of Sunny's situation, being obsessed with this shitty situation she has been put in, with her gender dysphoria, criminal father, and plethora of other issues. Mara believes that all these horrible experiences in life have made Sunny a more well-rounded person than Mara, believing that Sunny is wiser than her. The second iteration of the chorus then gets into even deeper details of what Mara has learned about Sunny, such as her blood type and habits. But while these are somewhat more personal details about Sunny's life, at the same time they're really nothing that deep in a person, being simple facts and observations. This represents Mara's complete detachment from Sunny socially, despite Sunny consuming her whole life. Like knowing someone's blood type does not make you one of their best friends. Contradicting the first verse where Mara was having the worst day of her life not being Sunny, she is now having the best day of her life being Sunny, as she had broken into her house and pretended to be her, doing all this just to feel like Sunny due to how severe her obsession is. The track is then closed by a third iteration of the chorus where Mara says,
I know that I scare you, but I'm nowhere near the worst you've seen.
admitting that Sunny is aware of the stalking, but doesn't do anything about it, as she has and is currently dealing with so much worse. One last thing I want to mention about this track is how heavily connected its themes are to April's previous project, Boneyard aka Fearmonger, and specifically the track Tongue in Cheek. Like all the tracks on Boneyard, Tongue in Cheek has an extended name, Tongue in Cheek Sunny, I think the girl next door has a crush on you. Making this track a direct connection to this title, as on the SoundCloud description of You Don't Even Know Who I Am, it says that Mara is Sunny's next door neighbor. Then on top of all this evidence pointing towards this connection, the entire premise of tongue-in-cheek is adapting to be like someone else due to your own individual lack of character. After a song talking about Mara's obsession with Sunny's problems, there's another song further delving into Sunny's problems. The specific subject of this track is Sunny being a victim of grooming. The song begins with the repeating of
Johnny, 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 whoops, Johnny, whoops, Johnny, 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 Johnny.
Johnny, Johnny, Johnny is a children's game, representing Sunny's maturity during all these experiences she was truly not ready for. The first verse of the track establishes the idea that because Sunny was a trans kid, it made her more susceptible to be groomed, and despite her avoiding any predatory relationships in real life, these people got to her through the internet. The second half of this verse then talks about this idea that once you're 18, you're ready for all these mature things, but that is truly not the case, and being 18 doesn't just automatically mean you're an adult with adult maturity. The chorus, as if a normal pop song, playfully talks about this Johnny character in an endearing way, but contains lines scattered throughout, showing how predatory these relationships are. This is mostly shown through Johnny having complete authority over Sunny's life. The following lines then explain how Johnny had gained control over Sunny, saying that he's the one that makes her real, in reference to how he affirms her gender identity, leading her to grow dependent on him as he is the only one who makes her feel like a girl. The chorus is then closed with the line, The second verse opens continuing to talk about how Johnny is preying on the fact Sunny has gender dysphoria, leading her to easily grow dependent. Following this, there's the line,
And I know I shouldn't cater to the sweet talk of a stranger, but James and Jake and Jimmy never talk to me that way.
revealing that this isn't the only person Sunny has been groomed by, and it's explained by April in the breakdown of the project that Johnny's a placeholder name for any of these men that preyed on her when she was younger, focusing the track on her being trans, explaining it as a societal grooming of sorts, where due to the place society had put her in as a trans child, it made it very easy for her to end up in the situation she did.
There is a kind of rabbit hole you can fall down as a trans kid. That's very predatory and sexual and very dangerous. And it's really hard to, when you're so young, to understand that that's not the answer for you. That was mainly the big thing, is that you can sort of be societally conditioned, I think, into giving yourself away to predators.
The second half of this verse then disturbingly recounts Sunny's meeting with Johnny, which is where she came to the realization that Johnny didn't truly love her and accept her for who she was, but instead was doing all this to manipulate her into doing sexual acts.
His tongue is in my mouth, hanging right above the couch. Where's posters of teenage girls? Oh, I have made a huge mistake.
The bridge then continues this horrific story.
And once he told me he was so glad that I hadn't been touched yet. I exited my body and it got up off the carpet.
The line about exiting your body is explaining how Sunny began to disassociate due to how terrified she was. From here, Sunny explains how she talked her way out of being there and fortunately was able to leave. Though it had been alluded to the entire track, this verse ends with a clear reveal that this is a predatory relationship with a heinous age gap. The track closes on a reiteration of the chorus, where instead of the final line being like the first chorus, it contradicts that line, instead saying, representing that Sunny now has a full understanding of how truly horrible the relationship was. One last thing I want to mention about this track is the instrumental and delivery, which has such a playful and colorful feel that really make the darker moments of the track feel much more uncomfortable than they would be on a somber instrumental. I love this as I feel it really makes a listener truly face the uncomfortable topic April discusses on the track, which for the subject matter is very important. The last three tracks mainly focused on Sunny, her issues, and her relationship with Mara. This now leads Wallsocket to dive into our third protagonist, Sarah, aka Old Money Bitch. The first entirely Sarah track on Wallsocket is Shoot to Kill, Kill Your Darlings. My personal favorite off the record, and possibly my favorite underscore song of all time. The title of the track, Shoot to Kill, Kill Your Darlings, is the combination of two sayings. The first half, Shoot to Kill, is pretty self-explanatory, meaning shooting a gun with the intention to kill someone. Then the second half, Kill Your Darlings, refers to the saying, "Don't be afraid to kill your darlings." That is common advice given to writers, meaning you need to be able to let go of unnecessary characters, storylines, etc. to better the entirety of the piece you're writing. This title is just absolutely perfect for the track, as Shoot to Kill Kill Your Darlings is a song about Sarah's friend who is dead set on joining the military despite it being extremely dangerous, having this obsession with patriotic violence. Hence, Shoot to Kill. This friend of Sarah's wanting to throw himself into such a dangerous lifestyle really worries Sarah, as she obviously doesn't want her friend to die. Hence, Kill Your Darlings. Backed by an infectious beat with super intriguing production that mixes drums and gun sounds, Shoot to Kill Kill Your Darlings opens with the lines,
When I was in school, I stayed away from the war recruits. I've always said, if he's got a favorite war, the kid has gotta be bad news.
explaining how Sarah has always had a distaste for the military and war, seeing it as immoral to have a favorite war due to the violent and destructive nature of them. In the second half of the verse, Sarah recounts a time when she went down to a gun range, and it gave her a little bit of an understanding of why some people have such a fixation on the military and weapons. The chorus contradicts the preceding lines, continuing to show that Sarah still has no understanding for why her friend could possibly want to join the military, with her theorizing that he has some sort of thirst for blood, feeling the need to kill someone. The song then further builds this track's theme on my favorite verse of the entire album, with Sarah talking about how the ROTC kid, Reserve Officers Training Corps, aka the military kid, is dating the captain of the cheerleading team. And everyone finds it odd that the two of them are dating, as the ROTC kid doesn't like how cheerleaders present themselves. But within all this, Sarah sees the irony, as though the ROTC kid believes that the cheerleader presents herself as she does for others, giving over her body, the ROTC kid is really doing the same by giving over his body to the government to be used in wars by politicians that really have no care for what happens to him. Returning to the chorus, Sarah continues to try to wrap her head around why her friend wants to join the military, wondering if it's the only choice he has. She then immediately answers that question by saying he could do something helpful and constructive, like being a firefighter, rather than violent and destructive, like the military. The third verse further cements that Sarah's friend joining the military is an active choice, not something he had been forced into by a hard life like many. Opening saying how his parents are a lawyer and a doctor, two well-paying and essential professions. Despite this, he wants to put himself in a hard and dangerous situation on the battlefield. The second half of the verse then addresses the predatory nature of military recruitment, with most people in the military being kids that had the military advertise them as a great alternative solution due to them doing poorly in high school, putting these underprivileged kids in the shitty and dangerous environment of the military because they were preyed on by recruitment organizations. But Sarah's friend is different. He wants to be there and knows exactly why. In the final verse, Sarah dreams about her life where her friend doesn't go off to war, and stays home, living a long, fulfilling life with a wife and kids, seeing the news cycle repeat over and over throughout his lifetime, showing that throwing himself on the battlefield and giving away his life makes no difference, and the fighting will continue with or without him. Sarah then returns to the chorus for a final time, bringing herself back to reality, simply hoping that her friend will return from war alive, ending the song with the haunting repetition of the line, This transitions perfectly into the next song, which is also from the perspective of Sarah, taking a very sudden shift from the upbeat track before into the most mellow track of the entire album. Horror movie soundtrack immediately hits you with its very vulnerable topic, that being suicide, with Sarah saying,
Lay down your arms, surrender at once, aim for the head, or go with your gut.
These lines bluntly explain methods to take your own life, such as taking a gun to your head. The final line of this verse then explains that Sarah has all the signs of depression, but no treatment has worked for her, making suicide feel like the only option she has left, as she simply cannot go on with her suffering. On the chorus, Sarah talks about how this end is inevitable for her, and she always has had this misery in spades, in great abundance, giving her love to Mara and Sunny before she takes her own life. The second line in the chorus then acknowledges how her isolation from the rest of the town contributes to her sadness,
You won't get away with it.
with this line referring to everyone in the town not letting her remove herself from her family legacy and live life like a regular person. The bridge continues to brutally detail how Sarah plans to take her own life, explaining that when she has a gun to her head, her whole world is in her fingers. Despite this, she doesn't feel a thing due to how numb depression makes her feel, giving her a complete feeling of apathy towards living. The track closes on an outro, saying whether or not she takes her own life, she wants to get rid of everything she owns, as to distance herself from her family. This is followed by the repeating of the aforementioned line,
You won't get away with it.
really making it clear to the listener that this thought is constantly rattling through her head. The thought that she will never be able to escape her family's legacy and she will be forever ostracized. The person most responsible for putting this thought into Sarah's head is Mara, as seen on the next track named after Sarah, titled Old Money Bitch. Old Money Bitch is the second track we get from the perspective of Mara, once again revealing her obsessive nature. This time, instead of obsessing about Sunny's struggle, it's obsessing about Sarah's privilege. But similar to her obsession with Sunny, this obsession with Sarah is also deeply rooted in jealousy. The track begins with the line,
Be that girl against the wall with her head turned down.
This line calls back to the previous track by mentioning how Sarah has her head turned down, representing this depression she's dealing with. From here, Mara makes fun of Sarah for all the privilege she had in her childhood growing up rich, attempting to portray her as some sort of antagonist to the town, leaving Sarah an outcast. The chorus then continues to taunt Sarah, with Mara telling everyone she can about her family's wealth and how she is only pretending to be like everyone else. In the second verse, Mara recounts an experience she had with Sarah when they were younger, and this is also where it is revealed that Old Money Bitch is Sarah.
After Sarah's sweet 19, we had our first big fight. She was like, we live ideal lives, and you don't realize. Trust me, I know what it's like.
This reveals that though Mara is so critical of Sarah for her wealth, Mara is also wealthy, even if not to the same degree as Sarah. So in these lines, Sarah is trying to explain this privilege that they both have, but clearly Mara has rejected the idea that she's anything like Sarah, as she continues to make fun of her in the following lines, talking about how Sarah pretends to be working class like everybody else by doing things like cutting her own hair and buying her own car on Craigslist. But most likely she's doing these things in an attempt to distance herself from the wealth she was born into, as she doesn't want to live with the legacy of her family. The refrain then explains how Sarah did hide her family's wealth until Mara dug up her past and exposed her to everyone for being an old money bitch. From here there's a bridge, which is framed like a conversation between Mara and Sarah, where Mara confronts Sarah despite Sarah just wanting to be left alone.
Did you know your parents are on Wikipedia? Your dad is an accomplished man, really. Like, to see all the things he's done for our country. And I know you went to that school in, like, DC, the one the president's kids go to, so, like, how'd you end up here? Money troubles?
The track is then closed by a reiteration of the chorus. Despite going through the entire track, there are still two more things I want to mention. Firstly is how Sarah is almost nearly exclusively referred to as Old Money Bitch. This represents how Mara has turned the whole town against her, with no one even seeing her as a person anymore, and instead as an elitist prick. Secondly, I want to highlight why Mara is doing this. I know it's obvious, but I just want to make it very clear that Mara's motive was not rooted in some idea of justice in the slightest. It was instead rooted in intense jealousy, obsession, and insecurity. The jealousy being how Mara wishes she had the complicated background that Sarah has, the obsession being with Sarah's struggle, trying to escape her family history and make a life of her own, then finally the insecurity, which I believe could come from her being insecure of her own wealth. And by drawing all the attention towards Sarah, it leaves no one to make fun of her for how wealthy she is, allowing her to fit in with everyone else. After 3 tracks focusing on Sarah, we return to Sunny on the track Jeez Louise, featuring Henhouse. Jeez Louise is the longest track on Wallsocket, having a runtime of a little over 7 minutes. This track does not waste a moment, being packed to the brim with lyrical meaning and phenomenal production. On earlier tracks, Sunny's gender identity had been connected to religion, but this track is where this theme is really explored, with April specifically talking about her Filipino background. The track opens with Sunny saying, showing that Sunny's gender identity is an extremely troubling topic for her, leading her to a point where she feels like she's gonna fucking explode. The first verse is opened with Sunny coming to the realization that her dysphoria is not God punishing her as she thought it to be on the track earlier, duh. Sunny talks about how this God who believed punished her on the track earlier isn't even her God. This is most likely referring to how Filipinos were victims of Spanish colonization, losing their cultures, losing their gods, a theme heavily mentioned throughout the rest of the track. The second half of the verse more directly focuses on Sunny being transgender, saying that though transgender people have been around for centuries, they're only now facing vicious prosecution due to how society has developed. Sunny then closes the verse with the line, "No one knows about it at all, so I guess it's not your fault," acknowledging the lack of awareness for both transphobia and the colonization of the Philippines. The chorus swiftly comes in after this verse, mainly focusing on one line. "It's just like me, she's just like me, you're just like me, damn it." This line is Sunny explaining her experience as a trans person with a changing pronoun for each rendition of Just Like Me, represents her seeing outside of the gender binary, relating to people of all gender identities. Delivered by Henhouse, in the second verse, Sunny continues to talk about her Filipino heritage. The verse begins with Sunny explaining that due to centuries of oppression and assimilation, she doesn't want to be the one to dig up her ancestral roots. Sunny then says how life has been made unfair towards colonized groups as they've been culturally set back, after being prosecuted for expressing their culture/religion for so long due to colonialism. The concluding line of the verse is,
Life seems to work in mysterious ways, but how's that my fault?
expressing that though Sunny has faced so much struggle in her life being Filipino and trans, it was entirely out of her hands. This relates to the earlier line, "This isn't a game I'd be happy to play," where she explains that she doesn't really want to live with the hand she was dealt. The third verse opens to what I think to be a My Little Pony reference, as the main six is a term used to refer to the six protagonists of My Little Pony. The significance of this could be Sunny expressing her femininity from a young age, as My Little Pony is typically seen as a girl show. The rest of the verse focuses on the historical presence of trans people, saying that many people lived beyond the gender binary pre-colonization, but were forced to change as European countries colonized the world. Sunny then says,
We don't have to talk about it. No, we don't have to talk about it.
once again acknowledging that colonization, and also specific to this verse, queer history, are not really talked about at all, despite it being very extensive upon examination. Sunny ends this off with the line,
People like us were among the divine until the cops arrived.
connecting back to her Filipino heritage, as in the Philippines pre-colonization, there was a third gender that assisted in connecting people with the spirit world, hence, among the divine. April explains this much better than me in an interview with Paste magazine. I'm Filipino, and pre-colonization, there was a third gender where there were a lot of people born male and presenting as female, and they had this shamanistic presence. They would help other people interact with the spirit world. When the Spanish came over, it slowly got phased out, and now all my relatives are Catholic. The fourth verse opens with the line,
Two souls in my body and mind.
this refers to the term two-spirit, which is a term for third genders in North American indigenous cultures. This somewhat mirrors the aforementioned third gender in pre-colonial Filipino culture. Continuing this theme of spirituality/religion intertwining with gender identity, Sunny talks about her experience growing up trans in a religious household. Transgender people are often seen as God's mistakes, leading to people who are religious and have gender dysphoria to suppress who they are in fear of being seen as a mistake. Sunny cements this idea, saying that a lot of closeted trans people are only suppressing themselves to follow the path God has supposedly made out for them as whatever gender they were assigned at birth. The second half of this verse talks about how prominent suicide is within trans youth.
41 at the back of my head.
Besides this line obviously saying that Sunny is putting a gun to her head to take her own life, the number used is also important, as it represents the often thrown around statistic that 41% of trans youth attempt suicide. The following line talks about how crucial parent support is, saying that if her mother didn't accept her, she thinks she would have taken her own life by now. Sunny concludes this verse with a general statement that no matter how much support a trans person gets, at the end of the day they still don't get what they want, being forever indebted due to how crushing dysphoria can be. Alternatively, this line could be referring back to colonization and how groups that were victims of colonization will never fully recover after the atrocities committed by the ones in power. Softly delivered by Henhouse, the fifth and final verse of Jeez Louise talks about how Sunny feels being Filipino in predominantly white America. This is most vividly shown in the line,
My mother tongue, she's aching for a shift. Familiar addition of sensibility.
talking about how due to assimilation, many people have lost their original languages. Also, I just want to mention how well written this line is. Talking about the mother tongue as if it's a living creature is just a really interesting idea to me. Later in the verse, there's the line, saying how religion has been historically used to justify colonizing groups. Alternatively, this line could be talking about the queer aspect of this song, saying how religion has deceived Sunny into thinking she cannot be trans. This interpretation could be further solidified by the closing line, which is Sunny questioning why she needs to repent for actions that hurt no one and do nothing but create joy for herself. Jeez Louise is a beautifully complex track, dissecting how intertwined religion and gender identity can be, backed by an intense instrumental that builds and releases tension in a vicious cycle throughout the track. One last thing I want to mention about this track is that there's an alternate B-side version of it you can find on YouTube that's really great. So great, in fact, that it's actually my ringtone. Following Jeez Louise is one of my favorite tracks on the album, 77 dog years. I just adore the soft guitar, the punchy drums, and the contradiction that those two sounds create to make such an earworm of a track. This track is also where Mara and Sunny's relationship goes from parasocial to a genuine connection, as Sunny opens up to Mara about her father, Joshua Domingo. Though most of the track is from the perspective of Sunny, 77 Dog Years begins with Mara once again talking about her obsessive habits. She does this by describing how she would hide in the trunk of Sunny's car in the morning to listen to her play her songs. Also, this verse is delivered as Mara talking to Sunny, and this whole track is staged as a conversation between the two girls. So I believe the purpose of this verse is to show Mara confesses her stalking to Sunny, but Sunny doesn't care and continues to open up to Mara. The second verse and the rest of the song is from the perspective of Sunny talking to Mara about her father. Sunny starts the verse talking about how she defended her father, being unaware of what he was truly doing.
Didn't know I was out of the loop, but it seemed like she'd already had it with you. You were a stranger, but I went to bat for you.
I especially love that last line as it shows how disconnected Sunny's father was from the family, with Sunny admitting that he felt like a stranger to her because of how absent he was. But nonetheless, she defended him as he is her father, only to see him betray her and the rest of the family, leaving them to face the social repercussions to his own actions. The second half of this verse talks about how this affected Sunny's family, with Sunny's mom's heart being broken as the man she loved abandoned her. Then talking about how even before her father left, the Domingo family were outcast from the rest of the town, in an attempt to keep her father's actions under wraps. There's then the chorus, which is phrased as if Sunny is confronting her father, asking him to face his actions, to give the family a sense of closure rather than just disappearing. Along with this, Sunny says,
Have you noticed your hounds have grown so since I went?
This line is revealing how much time has passed since he left, and how his family, his hounds, have grown old since then. So this is Sunny asking if her father even cares about the family, if he's even thought about them and how they've grown since he'd abandoned them. The bridge then further establishes the metaphor of the Domingo family being dogs, talking about this abandonment of his family as if he had abandoned his dog. The use of the dog metaphor is meant to represent how helpless the Domingo family felt after Joshua betrayed and left them behind, similar to how if a dog is left behind by their owner, it can't take care of itself. Similarly, Sunny compares herself to a small dog on the final verse of the track, to say how much she loved her father and really did love having him around. She then uses that exact same metaphor once again to describe how helpless she is, as she does try to protect her family following her father's abandonment, but she can't do much to help, like a small dog barking at a big dog, being in a situation she can't do anything about, no matter how valiant her effort. Mara feels an immediate guilt following Sunny opening up to her, as before Sunny had actually talked to her, she had no real impact on Sunny's life. But now that she does, she feels this weight on herself. It's no longer just harmless stalking, it's a real connection with real consequences. This feeling Mara has is talked about through the metaphor of suddenly growing freakishly long arms. This is talked about on track 11 of Wallsocket, Uncanny Long Arms, featuring none other than the legendary Jane Remover. Jane uses body horror in a lot of her writing, especially on her latest record Senses Designated, so I'm really glad it was incorporated into this track, as I find it to be a really interesting way to describe emotions, and it very much matches the atmosphere of the track. Anyways, the track begins with Mara revealing that she woke up one day with uncannily long arms, noticing her hands being in a completely different place from where they had begun. This physical change symbolizes Mara's newfound reach into Sunny's life, that she realizes could be potentially dangerous to Sunny, worrying that she will hurt Sunny as she can actually affect Sunny's life now. The chorus further solidifies how much this reach scares Mara, in not only the lyrics repeating, but also in her tone, that sounds absolutely terrified of what this newfound power means to her. Delivered by Jane, the second verse cements this fear, with Mara having trouble even accepting this reality due to how awful she thought it all to be. But no matter how desperately Mara wants all of this not to be real, it is, and there's no going back from the power she's gained. Remember the Secretariat Corporation from the beginning of the Wallsocket section? Well, the third verse on Uncanny Long Arms is where they come into play in the story. Secretariat offers an arm reduction procedure where they use the non-invasive method of extracorporeal shockwave therapy to reduce the length of one's arms. So out of fear, Mara went to Secretariat to get this procedure. Then in the third verse, it's revealed that something began to go horribly wrong during the procedure and she had nearly been killed. Though Mara did fortunately survive, she now has long-term effects from the shockwaves. Following her near-death experience, Mara found a newfound appreciation for life. My interpretation of this is that the arm reduction surgery is a metaphor for Mara attempting suicide, in fear of the power she had gained. Then this attempt failed, giving her new insight into how much she valued her own life. This reminds me a lot of the View from Halfway Down scene from episode 15, season season 6 of BoJack Horseman. This is a surrealist episode where BoJack faces death in a meeting with all the people in his life who have died. One of those people being his childhood idol, a famous racehorse, Secretariat, who had taken his own life after being banned from competitive racing. Coincidentally, the same name as the corporation in Wallsocket, which I just love as it fits so perfectly into this interpretation of the song. And I know Secretariat is like actually just a real life famous racing horse, but I just want to believe that there's some connection there, as it just works perfectly. Anyways, near the end of the episode, everyone faces their end, having a brief performance before they go. Secretariat recites a poem he had wrote, which describes how he felt while jumping from a bridge to take his own life, focusing specifically on the view from halfway down, where he had the realization of the true beauty of life. A little wind, a summer sun, a river rich and regal, a flood of fond endorphins bring a calm that knows no equal. You're flying now. You see things much more clear than from the ground. It's all okay. It would be, were you not halfway down. His issue was no longer his suffering, but the fact that he did jump, and there was no going back. Being utterly regretful for not seeing the view from halfway down before he jumped. For not thinking about the view from halfway down. There was so much he wanted to do in that moment, but his actions led him to a point where the only thing he could do was face the thing he wanted least. While Secretariat didn't get a second chance, Mara did. She had the gift of this epiphany alongside the gift of life, radically changing the way she thought about the value of her life. In a similar fashion to how the girls were introduced, on the closing track of Wallsocket, Good Luck Final Girl, the three girls' stories are concluded. The title of the track, Good Luck Final Girl, is a reference to the horror movie trope of a final girl, where after the rest of the cast has been killed off, the female protagonist remains to independently face the killer. The killer in the story being adulthood. This is elaborated upon in the SoundCloud description of the track. The girls realize that navigating adulthood is an individual responsibility. Good Luck Final Girl is opened by Mara's final verse. In this verse, Mara shows that old habits die hard, and she still has her obsessive tendencies.
So I shot out of bed, bought a stranger some breakfast. But when I got it, he was no longer there. I searched the whole station, I couldn't find him anywhere.
Explaining that though she has gotten over Sunny, she still attempts to find people to investigate and stalk, but at least to a lesser extent. Following Mara's verse is the chorus, which bids the girls farewell, hoping they get what they deserve after going through all the misfortune they didn't deserve seen throughout the album. This relates back to the final girl trope, as at the end of a horror movie, the audience hopes the final girl gets to live happily ever after, following the horrors that took place in the film. Sunny's verse talks about how she has stopped associating with Mara, claiming she doesn't need people like Mara anymore, as she's beginning to get past her many difficulties seen on the album, no longer needing bad relationships to seek asylum from her issues, now being truly happy, or at the very least independent. We then finally get Sarah's closing verse, which opens with her saying she will not be taking her life. But in the following line, it's heartbreakingly revealed that the reason she's not taking her life is because her friend died at war, believing it to be a disservice to his memory if she were to die an early death. A key detail I left out of the final girl verses is the fact that all three girls mentioned they were on a train leaving Wallsocket, moving into their adulthood independently, as said on the SoundCloud description of the track. The girls realize that navigating adulthood is an individual responsibility. Mara wishes she had missed the train, having trouble moving on from her past, similar to how she's having trouble breaking her old habits. On the contrary, Sunny has no issue leaving, getting off at every stop to explore. Then finally, Sarah is slumped over in the train crying, as she had just learned of her friend dying, showing that though she left Wallsocket, the things that the town have done to her will never leave her. To conclude this section, I'd like to draw the connections to real people on this album, as during this entire analysis, I've been talking about these experiences and emotions very disconnected from the artist who conveyed them, underscores. This is something I really love about this album, as though it very much tells the story of these three girls, it's really telling about the life of April. April talks about this in a conversation with Jane Remover, hosted by Office Magazine. The funny thing is that I've been seeing a lot of people point at one of the main characters and say, oh, this is the self-insert character. They're all the self-insert character. Otherwise, I think I'd be making a project that was apersonal or whatever. I just kind of split up things I was thinking about or going through into 3 different characters in order to show the different circumstances of each one of them. In real life, it's not like one character is one who suffers and one character is one who's fine all the time. Everyone is a mix of those three. This album being so personal, but behind the idea of a narrative, connects to the importance of certain artists featuring on certain tracks of the album, like Henhouse on Jeez Louise. As well, the song talks about Sunny's experience being trans and Filipino. Henhouse is non-binary and Filipino, obviously giving them much insight on how to write about this topic on this track as wonderfully as they did. The Underscore's discography might be the most important collection of music to me personally. I just have such a strong relation to her music. Though a lot of it does have to do with being trans, a lot of it simply has to do with the emotions she's expressing. Like Boneyard aka Fearmonger feels like it was written for me. That EP means the world to me and just brings me the utmost comfort. Her music makes me feel less ostracized being trans in high school. In an environment where I feel like I have very few people to relate to with my issues, her music really provides that relatability. The place I really came to this realization of how much her music truly meant to me was when I saw her live in Detroit. I live in Toronto, so when I went to the show, I was by myself in a city I've never been to. But I had so much fun and really feel like I could be myself there. Though this concert was the only time her music actually physically created this environment for me, her music does this for me every day in a more emotional sense, where I can feel more comfortable with myself and feel less out of place because of this art. And I know this isn't just me, and I know so many trans people and just people in general who find so much comfort in April's music, and it's just amazing. I really adore how she specifically did this for Wallsocket, with there being this entire world you can completely immerse yourself in, something I adore. Well, that's pretty much all I have to say. Also subscribe if you like this, because I plan to keep making videos like this about various other artists like Jane Remover, Osquin, and Quedeca. Also, I have a Twitter you should totally follow too. And also, if you have any other interpretations of the songs that I didn't really talk about, I'd actually genuinely love to hear them, as learning other people's perspectives on tracks that I love is just something I really like reading. So yeah.